Hey everybody, the Freelancer back again with the next video for Sonic the Hedgehog week. And I can't talk about Sonic the Hedgehog without talking about my personal favorite secondary character, my main man Knuckles. I love Knux. He's such a great character. Right when he was introduced in Sonic 3, I totally attached to him. Because, yeah, he was an antagonist at the start, but I like the fact that he basically evolved into Sonic's rival. And, you know, that he's more about strength and determination and responsibility, whereas, you know, Sonic, of course, is all about being carefree and running fast and taking life as he wants to take it. But either way, Knux is great, and what's even better is that he actually has his own game from the early days. Now, a lot of people don't know about this game because it was put onto something even less successful than the Sega CD, and that was the Sega 32X attachment. Now, I was lucky enough I actually did have this attachment when I was a kid. And, yeah, it's caught, you know, a lot of flack these days, especially after the Angry Video Game Nerd did a, you know, rant about it, because he rants about everything, you know. I usually take what he says with a grain of salt because it's just a character. And that's how I've always treated it. But a lot of people take it for gospel, and, you know, the minute somebody says something, the rest of the world just runs with it. I don't know. But one of the best games offered on that sadly ill-fated little, I don't know if you call it a system, but an attachment if nothing else, was this. Knuckles Chaotix. This game is great. And compared to other games for the platform, has aged pretty well, because it didn't stray too far from the Sonic formula as far as visuals. Unfortunately, just like most of the 32X games, it comes in this little box, and there's the cartridge. Still not a bad looking game by any stretch, not a bad looking package by any stretch of the imagination. A little bit difficult to hunt down complete, and certainly with the box in good condition, and finding the instructions, that can be even more difficult. Still, on top of Knuckles himself getting his own game, we were also introduced to the team Chaotix, who I'll introduce in the video, but two of them are Vector the Crocodile, who's fantastic, I love Vector, and then Espio the Chameleon, who still doesn't really look like a chameleon to me. It's the way his, you know, I guess you call it a helmet or whatever, kind of goes off the back of his head like that. It just looks, I don't know, it doesn't quite look like a chameleon as I think about it. But then again, I don't hang around chameleons all that much. That and being a pink color. But then again, if I can accept a blue hedgehog and a red echidna, I can accept just about anything else. So, here's the obscure Knuckles Chaotix.
You know me, the fighting freak Knuckles, and we're at Pumpkin Hill. You ready?
I just love this opening. I love the fact that the first thing you see flying at you is Metal Sonic, which, as I mentioned in Sonic CD, I love Metal Sonic, and then boom, we're hit with the Chaotix. Now, the first thing I do want to point out is that when you press start, you actually go into a menu screen here. And you can actually choose to go into training, though that does come up in the actual game, so we're not going to bother with that. Though I will state right from the beginning that there actually is quite a learning curve to this game. I'm still not anywhere close to being perfect at it. But we start out with Knuckles, and just, I know the clock's running, but, I mean, just take a look at this. You know, the changing, look at the background, how it moves as you move. You know, really, really high-end stuff for a 1995 game. And you'll see even better as we go in further into the game. But you see he's holding this big ring, and that's going to become important in just a few minutes. Well, a few seconds, really. You run Robotnik off, And the first character you meet is SPO the Chameleon. And you see this glittery thing in between here. That's actually sort of like a rubber band. And that's where all the difficulty comes in with this game. Look, I love how they've got the perspective moving around and the waving effects. I mean, they really pumped a lot into this game. And here's where they tell you how to actually go about, you know, controlling everything, but we're just gonna skip it. And you can see there's a lot of stuff that they need you to learn. And that's where a lot of people that even have had any exposure to this game tend to have a bit of difficulty, you know, really saying anything good about it. I mean, of course, the early Sonic games, it was one button controlled everything. That's it. That's all you needed to do. And I love this. Yep, Knuckles just grew about 3 times bigger. You gotta love that. And this is actually important because it helps him move faster and helps him pull the other character with him, because it adds weight to him. Now you gotta line your characters up, and the first thing you learn is that you can make a character stand and, as it says, hold. Then your other character moves forward, stretching the rubber band essentially, until you get to a certain point, and when it glows red like that, that means it's as far taut as it's going to get. Then you release the control stick and go flying around. And this is a great way to get an extra burst of speed. But the thing I've most noted about this game, aside from the rather steep difficulty in learning the controls, is that, one, the zones themselves are really humongous. I mean, I think I was a bit wrong when I stated how big they were in Sonic CD, though I still kind of hold to that statement simply because when I said it, what I meant was if you played through and went through the past, the present, and the future. This game, there isn't any of that, and these stages just feel like really big stages. And this whole opening sequence, there are no enemies whatsoever. It's just trying to teach you how to go about playing the game. Now, this is one of the harder things to pull off, is when you're up on a platform or one of your characters on a platform and trying to get them to come up with you. Though if you run into that difficulty, what you can do, the option you have, is to call the character back to you. Now the thing is that it does cost you 10 rings to do that, so something to keep in mind. And rings play a big factor throughout this whole game. Not just the one that's connecting you, and not just the traditional picking up as many gold rings as you can, but in fact, even play a big role in the special stages, more so than probably any other Sonic game. There's also something else that I'll show you guys once we get to it. Now, I do tend to pick Knuckles most of the time. One, partly due to favoritism. The other thing being that his climbing ability is an absolute godsend, because there's sometimes in this rubber banding effect, you'll see the other character just get wild, and you can't really go where you're wanting to go. So I find the best thing to do sometimes is just grab onto a wall and have him climb up and carry whoever it is with him. It really helps you avoid quite a bit of headache. Sometimes there are certain things that only the other character can activate, like this ledge here. So you have him hold on the ledge, and then get pulled up. When you saw him kept flashing to the screen there, that's what I was talking about with a bit more of that difficulty, is that sometimes you'll get mixed up with the buttons and end up calling the character by accident, and then of course every time you do that you waste 10 rings. That's a bit problematic if you ask me. Plus the way that sometimes they just act squirrely when you're not right there with them. That and this whole thing about trying to get your character back up on the same platform, it can be a bit tricky at times. But as I stated, there is a difficulty to these controls in comparison to other Sonic games, and that's part of what makes me not recommend this, even to a lot of Sonic fans. Because really, in the end, this isn't a Sonic game. It's a Sonic spin-off, and it's a Knuckles game. And that's actually what I appreciate about it most, is that because it has such a different control scheme and a different way to go about playing it, it really does feel like Knuckles' game. It feels like it belongs to him, and while it could have worked with Sonic in it, in fact, the early beta test for this game was called Sonic Crackers, which you can find a lot of information about that online. I'm not even going to go into it here. But still, at the end, I really think that this is strictly Knuckles' game and Knuckles alone. And the fact that the controls are different, the camera perspectives, just the look and feel of everything makes it feel so much different from your average Sonic game. And this is where that's really apparent. What you just went into was the special stage. And these special stages, I mean, look at this. These are so incredibly cool. Now again, keeping in mind this is a 1995 game released to an add-on to a 16-bit console, which allowed it to push the kind of graphics that you just couldn't push before like that. And this was pre, PlayStation, Sega Saturn, Nintendo 64 days. So, kind of take what you can get. But because of the way they did it, because of the way they did this game, it still holds up compared to a lot of other early 3D attempts. Now you'll notice up in the upper left corner how my rings actually keep coming up and down. Because the way it works in these special stages is that those rings more or less act as your timer. And so the more rings that you collected during the main stage, the more time that you'll have in the special stages to gather all the blue spheres that you need to. You'll also be able to collect rings, as you can see, as you go along, but in the end it helps to have that nice buffer from the start. Because if you can go through an area and maybe you miss a couple of spheres that you would have otherwise needed, that timer allows you to go through another section and pick up more of the spheres without worrying about losing. Well, you still have to worry about losing just because you don't want to get hit too often, because each time you get hit takes away from your rings, of course. Plus, you don't want to fall off and into that space that it's got going there. And there is your goal, which is a Chaos Ring, rather than the usual Chaos Emeralds. And then you get to see all the other characters, as I mentioned, Knuckles the Echidna, Mighty the Armadillo, Espio the Chameleon, Charmy Bee, and Vector the Crocodile. Now, of course, these three wouldn't appear again until Sonic Heroes as Team Chaotix. So it was basically about 11 years before we would see any of them again. And Mighty the Armadillo hasn't been seen since. I don't know what he's been up to. Maybe he's been chilling out. Who knows? But this is the last time you saw Mighty. Now, what you'll probably notice looking at him, though, is how he really looks a lot like Sonic the Hedgehog. Well, for anybody who doesn't know, long and short version of the story, he originally was the character they were going to use before they decided on Mr. Needlemouse, who would later be named Sonic and become the blue blur that we all know and love. I have to say, I usually tend to go with Knuckles, though. But I mean, look at this. I love all this color and how fat these pixels are. What they honestly make me think of is, games like you would have seen on the Neo Geo system, for example. They use this claw catcher to grab one of your other characters, and you've got the ones like I already named. We'll go with Mighty here. And then the other characters you saw there, the yellow and the tiny blue ones, are Heavy the Mechanic and Bomb the Mechanic, which are basically booby-priced characters. That's why there are more of them. And while they still serve most of the same functions that the other characters do, they're still not great to have just because they can also harm you. Now this is the level select area. It does a roulette thing, and then it basically picks it for you. It's not like the usual games where you're moving along stage to stage and you're just going through the motions. This is actually, you know, doing everything at random. So you may do level 1 of Techno Tower here, for example, and then it'll randomly select another area and you'll have to do stage 1 for that. And then if you get the Techno Tower again, then you get to do stage 2. Now because of this, because of the way it's set up, and again because of the length, there is that battery save, that battery backup save in the game, so that you can pick it up and do it again later on if you wanted to. The other thing you've probably seen by now is they do move fast. They don't move quite as fast as Sonic himself. Well, again, that makes sense to me because this isn't a Sonic game. Just a spin-off. I know I keep making mention of that, but I really do want to drive that point home. I love that. I mean, you go from regular looking to all fuzzy and strange. I love that. I just love everything they did in this game. And it's such a disappointment that, you know, most people aren't able to get to play it. You know, and it really is, even as good as as much as I'm praising it, it's still a game that I find difficult to say to people, oh yeah, you should totally go buy a 32X just for this one game, because the 32X itself can be a little bit pricey, plus finding all the wires and attachments and everything. So I really still can't recommend this to only but the most diehard of Sonic and Sega fans. There we go. And the different characters do have other abilities. Mighty tends to be able to... Oh, and here's something else. I'll show you this. If you're in a situation where you can't get up because Knuckles can't climb up to it, you can actually pick up the other character, jump up, and with any luck, throw them upward and get through. Or jump like that and get them through too. Like I said, the controls are really what get people with this game, and you're either going to get used to them or you probably never will. And that's the other thing though, as I was saying, with that 32X attachment and all the things that are going on with this game, the other thing is that this one can be a little bit pricey if you're trying to hunt it down, especially if you're like me and you want to have, you know, the box, the manual, and all that stuff. You know, it can run you about the, give or take, about the $40 range. So not exactly the cheapest game to get a hold of. So there again, that's what really makes me say that unless you're a major Sonic or Knuckles fan, I really don't recommend this game to everybody. Still, it is fun to look at, and certainly a lot of fun to play if you do decide to go ahead and get it. Whoop. The other thing you don't want to do, like I say, you lose rings there, and that takes away from your time. The other thing you don't want to do, and I'll just show it to you when I get the opportunity, is fall out of the area. Though, I do admit being able to see that background is pretty funny looking. Let me just jump out here and show you. I mean, I love that. That pulsating just looks great. And if you take the exit here, it'll actually save the game on the battery backup for you. So, that's pretty cool. And they don't call them stages, I'm sorry. As you can see, they call them neutronic high zone attractions. And you can really see right here the resemblance between Mighty the Armadillo and Sonic the Hedgehog, and their attitudes and everything. So, hope you've enjoyed this obscure little gem, and back to your regularly scheduled program. Now, of all the games that I've talked about and will be talking about this week, this one's the hardest one to hunt down. Rumored is that it was meant to be released as part of the Sonic Gems collection, which I mentioned during the Sonic CD video, and you actually can unlock a gallery that has screenshots and information on the game, but it's not actually there. Speculation is that there was a lot of issues they probably ran into trying to emulate it, since most of those compilation discs, all they really are just emulations of already existing games. And I can understand where that would have been an issue. They already had the Sega CD emulator running for Sonic CD. They had an arcade emulator, a Sega Saturn emulator, and then a Game Gear emulator. So maybe they just couldn't fit it on there, who knows. But, unfortunately what that means is that if you want to play this game, you either have to go completely the illegal route to do so, or you have to have yourself a Genesis, a Sega 32X adapter, and the right cables to hook it up to whichever model Genesis you're using, and then you have to have a copy of the game itself. Now, Genesis systems are a dime a dozen. They're easy to find. The 32X, it depends. Sometimes you can find them pretty cheap. Most of the time, you're still going to pay a little bit for them, a little bit of change. And then this game, depending on what condition you're looking for, you can find it on eBay, but don't expect to get anywhere under the $40 tag. And when you consider the nature of this game, the fact that really only your diehard Sega and Sonic fans are the ones that are going to want to play it, as I mentioned during the gameplay footage, it's really difficult to recommend this to anybody except those kind of people. Still, upon the same token, if you can or get the opportunity at some point to play it, however you go about it, I don't want to know, I really do recommend doing so. It's really worth your time. And again, one of the better games, probably, I'd almost go so far as to say the best game on the 32X. So this has been the Freelancer, and Knuckles, and the Chaotix, and hope you all have enjoyed this, and I'll see you next video as Sonic Week continues. Later.